Welcome to Storytime with Ria. Kindly subscribe to my channel, like, and share the video if you enjoy the story. In the village of Zuma, one lovely evening, the sun casting a golden glow over the rooftops of the mud houses and the lush green fields that surrounded them, the air buzzed with excitement, because the Prince Kalasi, the heir to the royal throne of Zigangan, and 15 other realms, was on a quest to find his future queen. When news spread about Prince Kalasi, quest to find a wife. So many eligible maidens' parents were preparing for the Yam festival, knowing fully well the prince will be present. Mothers spent weeks dyeing their daughters' wrappers, carefully polishing their beads to perfection, and their hair was styled in intricate patterns. But not everyone in the village was preparing to meet the prince. In a small corner of the village, Amaya sat quietly, grinding millet for her stepmother, Madame Zurima. Amaya had always been treated poorly, while her stepsisters were showered with love. Madame Zurima saw Amaya as nothing more than a servant, to meet her every demand. The long-awaited Yam festival day came. Every corner of Zigangan village was filled with excitement. Amaya, Madame Zurima's sharp voice echoed through the house. Why are you sitting there? Take the water pot and go to the stream. I need fresh water for cooking. Amaya's heart sank. The stream was far and fetching water would keep her away for hours, but Madame. Amaya began, her voice trembling. The prince is coming today, can't I? Before she could finish her sentence, you dare talk back to me. Madame Zurima snapped, her face darkening. You think someone like you deserves to see the prince? Look at yourself. No royal blood would glance at a girl like you. Crushing the urge to argue, and risk getting punished. Amaya tied her scarf tightly around her head, picked up the heavy pot and started the long walk to the stream as she trudged along the path. She heard the lively chatter of other girls heading to the village square. Their laughter echoing as it faded, the more steps she took. Her heart ached with longing, but she pushed the thought away. Life had never been fair to her, and she had learned not to hope for things beyond her reach. At the village square, Prince Kalasi arrived amidst a grand procession, drummers beating their instruments, and villagers danced in colorful swirls of joy, the prince dressed in regal attire. He dismounted his horse with a quiet grace. His sharp features and confident aura made many maidens' hearts race, but despite the spectacle, his expression remained unreadable. He wasn't here for flattery or inauthenticity, he sought authenticity, something rare and precious. He has visited 8 realms in his kingdom within 2 months, all in the hopes of finding a wife, but to no avail. He was hoping he will find someone authentic during the Yam festival, since other villages from his realm and beyond do attend this festival. And he can't help but feel disappointed with the maidens he has seen, so he decided to wander into the bush. Meanwhile, at the stream, Amaya was kneeling by the water filling her pot. The cool breeze and gentle rippling of the stream offered her a rare moment of peace. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching until they were almost upon her. Hello there, a deep smooth voice said. Startled, Amaya looked up and her eyes widened. Standing before her was Prince Kalasi himself. She recognized him immediately from the stories she had heard. But why was he here, and why was he speaking to her? My prince, she stammered, quickly bowing her head. Forgive me, I didn't. Before she could finish her sentence, no need to apologize, he interrupted gently, a small smile playing on his lips. I saw you from the path and thought I'd say hello. Why are you out here alone? Amaya hesitated. Should she tell him the truth? that her stepmother had sent her away to keep her from meeting him. "I came to fetch water," she finally said. "It's my duty." The prince studied her for a moment. There was something about her, an honesty, and a simplicity that he hadn't seen in the other girls who had thrown themselves at him. In other villages, "What is your name?" he asked. "Amaya," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amaya," he repeated as if testing the name on his tongue. "It suits you." Before Amaya could respond with a thank you, a loud commotion from the village square echoed through the air. Prince Kalasi turned his head briefly but didn't seem in a hurry to leave. "Will you be at the square later?" he asked, his gaze returning to her. Amaya's cheeks flushed. "I don't think so, my prince." The village buzzed with stories of Prince Kalasi's visit long after he had left the square. Women gossiped in the market. Young men debated his character, and the maidens who had gathered to meet him recounted every glance and word with eager embellishment. But none of them knew about the prince's encounter at the stream. In the small compound where Amaya lived, Madame Zurima and her two daughters Burima and Churima were bursting with excitement. They had seen the prince up close, and were convinced he had noticed them. "He looked right at me when he dismounted his horse," Burima bragged, twirling a strand of her beaded hair. "Nonsense," Churima interjected. "He smiled at me when I greeted him. You were standing too far back for him to notice you." Amaya listened quietly from the corner where she was grinding pepper. Her stepmother had given her a mountain of chores to complete as usual. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the prince. His kind eyes, his gentle smile, the way he had said her name. It all felt like a dream. Madame Zurima's sharp voice broke. "Amaya, stop daydreaming and finish your work. We need to prepare for tomorrow. The prince may visit again." "Yes, stepmother," Amaya replied, lowering her head to hide her emotions. Meanwhile, at the palace, Prince Kalasi was deep in thought. His advisors and attendants surrounded him, discussing the day's events and the women he had met, but Kalasi barely listened. His mind kept returning to the girl at the stream. There had been something genuine about her, something that stood out from the polished smiles and practiced courtesies of the other maidens. "Your Highness," his chief advisor said, breaking through his thoughts, "have you made any decisions about the women you met today?" Kalasi shook his head. "Not yet. I need more time." The advisor nodded, though he seemed slightly frustrated. "Very well, Your Highness, we will continue to visit other villages as planned." The prince nodded absent-mindedly, but his heart wasn't in it. Before leaving for the next village, he wanted to see Amaya again to learn more about her. The next morning, Amaya was at the market helping her stepmother sell vegetables. She worked diligently arranging the produce and attending to customers, but the whispers and stares of the villagers made her uncomfortable. She caught snippets of conversations as she moved through the crowd. "Did you hear the prince was seen near the stream yesterday? Who was he talking to?" "No one seems to know." "It couldn't have been anyone important, probably just a servant fetching water," the people said. Amaya kept her head down, hoping no one would connect her to the story. But deep down, a small part of her felt a flicker of joy thinking about the short conversation she held with the prince. His kind words and confident aura was very charming. The sun began to set. Amaya was exhausted. She returned home with Madame Zurima and her stepsisters carrying the unsold vegetables on her head. As they approached the compound, many villagers were gathered outside their gate, murmuring excitedly. "What is going on?" Madame Zurima demanded. Pushing through the crowd, standing in the center of the crowd, was Prince Kalasi, his regal presence unmistakable. He turned toward Madame Zurima and spoke with authority. "I have come to speak with Amaya." Gossip erupted from the onlookers. Amaya's heart stopped. Her stepmother's face twisted with shock and barely concealed anger. Burima and Churima exchanged looks of disbelief. Amaya. Madame Zurima repeated, her voice rising. What could the prince possibly want with her? Carlos's gaze was steady. I would like to speak with her alone. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Amaya stepped forward hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. The villagers' eyes burned into her. Some curious, others filled with disbelief. Madame Zurima's face flushed with anger as she moved to block Amaya's path. Your Highness. Madame Zurima began forcing a smile. I'm afraid Amaya is quite busy with her chores. Surely you'd prefer to speak to one of my other daughters, Burima or Churima. Kalasi's expression didn't waver. Thank you, Madame Zurima, but I wish to speak to Amaya. Madame Zurima hesitated, her smile faltering. She turned to Amaya, her eyes flashing with warning. Go inside, Amaya, now. But before Amaya could retreat, the prince spoke again, his voice firm, yet kind. Amaya, will you step out and speak with me? The villagers gasped in unison. This was no simple request. It was a direct order. Amaya looked at her stepmother, then at the prince. She knew there would be consequences for disobeying Madame Zurima, but the look in Prince Carlos's eyes gave her courage. Yes, my prince, she said. Stepping forward, the crowd parted to let her through. Madame Zurima glared at her, but Amaya kept her gaze on the ground as she walked toward the prince. When she stood before him, he gestured for her to follow him to a quieter corner of the compound. I'm sorry for the scene, Carlos said once they were alone. I didn't mean to cause you any trouble. I'm just surprised you would want to speak to me. Carlos smiled. Why wouldn't I? You seem kind, beautiful, hardworking and genuine. I don't meet many people like you. Amaya's cheeks flushed. Thank you, my prince. I wanted to ask you something. Kalasi continued, his tone serious. Would you consider attending a gathering at the palace tomorrow? I'd like to get to know you better. Amaya's eyes widened. The palace. But I have lots of chores to do at home. And I'm not like the other girls you've met. I am just a simple girl that might not fit into your world. Exactly, Kalasi said, his gaze steady. That's why I'm asking you. For a moment Amaya couldn't speak. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. She really liked the prince. She wants to know him better. But what would her stepmother say? How would the villagers react? But beneath the fear, a tiny spark of hope began to grow. Perhaps this was her chance to get to know the prince. Maybe a chance for her to fall in love, and a chance for her to break free from the life she had always known. If my stepmother allows it, I will come, she said finally. Kalasi nodded. I will make sure she does. Until tomorrow, Amaya, as he walked away. The crowd erupted into whispers. Amaya turned to face Madame Zurima, whose expression was thunderous. Burima and Churima stood behind her, their faces twisted with jealousy. You've embarrassed me. Madame Zurima hissed. As the villagers began to disperse, we'll talk about this later. Amaya lowered her head and went to start preparing dinner. But her heart felt lighter for the first time. She allowed herself to dream of a life beyond her stepmother's shadow. The morning sun bathed the village of Zigangan in a golden hue as Amaya nervously prepared for her journey to the palace. Madame Zurima, fuming, but powerless against the prince's wishes, begrudgingly handed her an old dress to wear. It was plain and worn, a sharp contrast to the lavish outfits she had reserved for Burima and Churima. Don't embarrass me further, Madame Zurima snapped, as Amaya adjusted the dress. Don't think this will last. As soon as the prince spends time with you, he will realize that you are not his type, so don't forget your place. Amaya nodded silently. too excited to let her stepmother's words dampen her spirits. She styled her hair neatly, grabbed the basket she had prepared with fresh fruits as a gift, and began the walk to the palace. The villagers watched her with a mix of curiosity and envy. Whispers followed her every step. How did someone like Amaya catch the prince's attention? She must have bewitched him. There's no other explanation, the villagers gossip. But Amaya ignored them. Her heart focused on what lay ahead. The palace gates loomed tall and majestic, guarded by soldiers in gleaming uniforms. As she approached, one of the guards stepped forward. Are you Amaya? He asked. His tone formal. Yes, she replied, clutching her basket tightly. Follow me. The guard led her through the grand gates and into the palace grounds. Amaya's breath caught as she took in the beauty around her. Manicured gardens, fountains that sparkled in the sunlight, and towering walls adorned with intricate carvings. It was like stepping into another world. Prince Kalasi awaited her in a shaded courtyard, dressed in a simple but elegant tunic. He smiled warmly as she approached. Amaya, I'm glad you came, he said, his voice as kind as she remembered. Thank you for inviting me, my prince. She replied, bowing slightly. He gestured for her to sit on a cushioned bench beneath a flowering tree. You don't have to be so formal today. I want to get to know you. The real you. Amaya hesitated but eventually sat down. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. Kalasi began asking her questions about her life, her family and her dreams. At first she answered cautiously, unsure of how much to reveal, but as the conversation flowed she found herself relaxing. She told him about her late parents, how her stepmother had taken her in. She spoke of her love for weaving and how she often dreamed of one day selling her own fabrics in the market. But right now she doesn't have much spare time and capital to start up. So she only weaves fabrics for her neighbors, and the money she has saved up is not enough to rent a space in the market yet. But before the year ends, she is sure she will be able to rent a space and get some fabrics. Kalasi listened intently, nodding and asking thoughtful questions. You're incredible, Amaya, he said after a while. Most people in your position would have given up on their dreams. Judging from what I see, your stepmother doesn't treat you well. At least I have a roof over my head, food to eat, and clothes to wear. I'm grateful for that, Amaya said. Kalasi could not help but admire her and how she always focused on the things she can be grateful for, instead of complaining about how life wasn't fair to her. I admire your perspective on life, Kalasi said. I have no other choice, she said. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Kalasi rose to his feet. Thank you for spending time with me. Let me escort you home so your stepmother will not have reasons to stop you from coming to the palace. They walked back to the village together, the prince's presence drawing astonishing stares from everyone that passed. When they reached her compound, he paused and turned to her. I will come and visit you soon, he said. Take care of yourself. As he walked away, Amaya stood at the gate, her heart filled with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, she knew her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The news of Amaya's visit to the palace spread like wildfire through every corner of the village. Some admired her for her sudden rise to prominence, while others like Burima and Churima burned with jealousy. One day after the prince came to see Amaya, Madame Zurima's wrath was uncontainable. How dare you bring such attention to this household? She spat at Amaya. Do you think you're better than my daughters now? Amaya kept her head low, enduring the scolding in silence. Deep down, she held on to the memory of Prince Kalasi. This was a way to shield against her stepmother's anger. The next day, a messenger from the palace arrived with an invitation for Amaya to attend a royal feast. It was to be a grand event with nobles from across the kingdom. Madame Zurima tried to argue, insisting that Amaya wasn't fit for such an occasion, stating how she does not have a suitable dress for the occasion, but the messenger's firm stance left no room for debate. The messenger also told her that the prince has sent a befitting dress, so she didn't need to worry. The time the feast approached, she wore the stunning dress that Prince Kalasi had sent for her. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she could not believe she could look this beautiful. The escort that Prince Kalasi sent to pick Amaya arrived on time to take her to the palace. Amaya felt out of place among the nobles, but Prince Kalasi's reassuring smile eased her nerves. He introduced her to the guests. Amaya became more comfortable and felt like she belonged. But not everyone welcomed her warmly. Among the nobles was Lady Juma, a wealthy and influential woman who had long hoped to secure her daughter's marriage to the prince. She regarded Amaya with disdain, determined to undermine her. During the feast, Lady Juma approached Amaya with a saccharine smile. "You must feel so out of place here, dear. After all, this isn't your world." Amaya met her gaze calmly. "You're right, but I believe people can rise above where they come from." Lady Juma's smile faltered. She walked away defeated. Prince Kalasi, who had overheard the exchange, was impressed by Amaya's composure. As the evening progressed, Kalasi stood to address the gathering. "In my search for a future wife, I have met many women, but one stands out, not because of her wealth or status, but because of her heart, strength, and authenticity." The room fell silent as he turned to Amaya. "Amaya, will you be my partner not just in the palace, but in life?" Amaya's voice trembled as she said, "Yes, my prince, I will." The hall erupted in applause. Lady Juma and few persons glowed. Back in Zigangan, the villagers celebrated Amaya's engagement. Even Madame Zurima, though begrudgingly, acknowledged her. Borima and Churima avoided her, unable to hide their envy. Amaya and Prince Kalasi wedding preparations filled the villagers with joy and excitement. Villagers and nobles alike marveled at how, once overlooked and mistreated Amaya, now found herself at the center of a grand celebration, and a role both noble ladies and middle-class ladies can only dream of. Madame Zurima had no other option than to treat Amaya with respect, and she also regretted how she treated her. Borima and Churima, however, sulked in the shadows. Amaya, ever kind, had invited her stepmother and her stepsisters to participate, hoping to bridge the rift. "This is a happy time for all of us," she told them gently. "Let us move forward together." The wedding day arrived and the palace shone brightly with decorations. Amaya dressed in a gown she had designed herself. The king and queen were happy for their son. Prince Kalasi waited for Amaya at the altar, his gaze filled with pride and love as they exchanged vows and some rituals was performed, which sealed them as husband and wife. The hall erupted in cheers. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories.